Good morning, world. I am Judy, your web-based therapist, making therapy accessible and convenient for our clients in Florida and New York, and of course, sharing information worldwide. Today, I'd like to talk about 5 gifts that people with ADHD have that can sometimes be masked as symptoms, or sometimes be mischaracterized as symptoms, or just be misunderstood. But um, but before I jump in, let me just take a moment and say, if you are subscribed, thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. And if you are not yet subscribed, please click on the subscribe button below to make sure that you are subscribed, and remember to tick the bell so that you are notified when I post new videos, because I'm doing that a little bit more regularly now. And of course, if you'd like to purchase 1 or 3 of my books, there's also a link below that will show you all the different places where you can purchase 1 or 3 of my books. Okay, let's get back to work. Okay, first, creativity. People with ADHD, very often you hear people talk about how people with ADHD are creative. They are super creative. They have that outside the box thinking. They can come up with the most out of this world solutions and thoughts and ideas that the rest of us are not thinking of. So a lot of times, in order to come, while they're coming up with these creative ideas, with these really super exciting ideas, they are kind of distancing themselves from the whatever that meeting is that is happening, whatever conversation that was going on. So sometimes that's one of the things that people look at, that inattentiveness. And yes, there is that inattention that does happen with ADHD. However, there's also the part where it's not so much the person is spaced out, it's that the person is inside thinking and coming up with brilliant ideas. And that creativity is one of the reasons that it makes it a little bit more difficult for people with ADHD to be in certain jobs. And it's best, or the ideal situation is to be in positions that allow space, that allow room for that creativity to thrive, for that creativity to flourish and grow and be nurtured, as opposed to trying to stifle and shove it down. 2, resilience. As part of being in a world that was not built for people with ADHD, a world that has your whole life been saying, "Hey, be like these people," a world that was not built to accommodate you. People with ADHD have grown and developed skills and become adapters. They've figured out ways to live in a world within a system that wasn't even thinking about them when that system was created. So that resiliency sometimes means that they've created alternatives to doing things. They've created new ways. They've created ways to help them survive in this world that wasn't built for them. And sometimes those tools, those ways, those methods can be misunderstood by others. And they may not be always appreciated by others. But that resiliency is a strength. And not only does it help with adapting to a world that wasn't built for that's not working with your ADHD, that resiliency help you be a stronger person overall, because you don't just get that skill and say, "Hey, I'm going to be resilient when it comes to ADHD stuff." No, that you become as you get to be more resilient, you're resilient in all parts of life, and you're able to adapt to all parts of life, even when ADHD is not concerned, even when it's just regular life changes. 3, problem solving. People with ADHD are excellent problem solvers. And part of that comes from the fact that they're so creative, that they can have those outside the box ideas. But another part of it is from that resilience, from that learning to adapt that they've had to do their whole lives. So people with ADHD are often very excellent problem solvers, but they don't solve problems. They don't go through it. They don't go about it the way that everyone else does, because that's one of the things that happens with ADHD. You do things, you just do them your way. And sometimes the world is not cool with that. The world is not as ready to adapt and accept the fact that, hey, there's a different way of doing it. And they try to stifle it. They try to dismiss it. They try to set you aside. They try to not pay attention. Use your voice. Speak up. If you have a great idea, share it. If you have a solution to a problem, it's okay to share it. And yeah, Sometimes it may be that you share it and they're not responsive. Sometimes it may be that someone is not willing to listen, but don't let that stop you. People with ADHD are excellent problem solvers. So continue to use that skill, develop that skill, and grow that skill, no matter what anyone else says. Four, people with ADHD are often very empathetic. And often you hear people say how people with ADHD are emotional. That's the criticism, or that's the, I don't know, whatever. I don't know what I would characterize it, but uh, people often say that people with ADHD are emotional. But that emotional, or what they're calling emotional, is that sense of empathy that people with ADHD has. Maybe part of it is that conditioning from growing up your whole life and hearing people tell you, hey, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, people making you feel bad for not living up to their standards. And you've gotten to that point of feeling bad for making other people feel bad. That when people say people with ADHD are so emotional, a lot of it is more a reaction that people are having to maybe disappointing or thinking they disappointed someone. Maybe thinking that they hurt someone, so now feeling bad for thinking that, for hurting the person, or at least because they think they hurt the person. It's really taking in the emotions associated with other people that often come off as being so emotional, that often comes off in really strong feelings. There's nothing wrong with caring. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with being emotional. People make it sound like it's bad, but you know what? We're all human and we all do things differently. We all adjust and adapt differently, and it's okay. If you're emotional, so what? You're emotional. But again, a lot of it is empathy. You feel what other people feel. It would be nice if we didn't care so much about people who don't care. But sometimes that's who we are, and that's who we are. If that's who you are, then that's who you are. Don't worry about it. It's okay to care, even if the world is not ready yet. 5, people with ADHD are often very energetic and driven. One of the criticisms that people often use or against that is that because they're so energetic and driven, they need to be constantly stimulated. So if something is not stimulating them, if something is not keeping their attention, they're pretty quick to leave, which comes with a lot of people with ADHD often have very long resumes of job hopping because, hey, this one wasn't keeping their attention. They moved on to someone else. They moved on to something else. And then that one didn't do it. So they moved on to something else. So they're always looking for that next thrill, that next opportunity, that next thing that's going to captivate them, keep their attention. And if something doesn't do it, they just move on to someone else. But to the rest of the world, it comes off as flighty. It comes off as not being stable. But part of it, what it really is that your people with ADHD are always in search of that stimulation. They're always in search of something to captivate them and something to challenge them. That's another thing. With that drive, a lot of times you get the great idea, you start it, you start working on it, and you're ready to move on to the next thing. So it's one of the things that works is having a system in place so that when the next new brilliant idea comes into play, you have a way of completing what that last great brilliant idea that you started working on. But that is one of the reasons that many people with ADHD are so successful. I always, whenever I think of this, I think of Sir Richard Branson because that man has done so much and he continues to do even more because, hey, that's one of the things that ADHD does for you is that you have that creativity, you have that energy, and you have that drive, and it works. Let's do a quick recap. 1, creativity. Don't let the world stifle your creativity. It's what helps you be different. It's what helps you figure out things that other people can't figure out. You have that outside the box thinking, and that is actually awesome. 2, resilience. In order to adapt to the world that was not built for you, that wasn't even thinking about you, you've had to come up with a few different ways of adapting. But in the process, you develop that resilience that works in other places too. It actually made you stronger. 3, problem solving. People with ADHD, again, are great problem solvers because you've had to adapt and change and make adjustments your whole life. And because of that, it helps you be better problem solvers. Even if the world is not ready to accept it, even if the world is not ready to welcome your problem solving skills, don't let them stifle it. 4, people with ADHD are empathetic. You're not emotional. Not that there's anything wrong with being emotional. You just care. You care about people. If you think you hurt someone, it hurts you. You feel what other people feel. Yes, it would be easier if it wasn't that way because you would have fewer negative feelings to handle, but unfortunately, you feel what other people feel. And that's why sometimes people think you're emotional. And, and you're just caring about them. 5, people with ADHD are often very energetic and driven. Many people think that it means that you're flighty, that you're not able to stick to something, but no, you're just in search of the next thing to captivate and keep your energy and get you excited and challenge you. You need to be constantly moving. You need to be challenged. And instead of just letting people talk you out of being driven and going for the next best thing, have a system in place so that you can, when the next new idea comes, you have a system in place to finish out the last brilliant idea you had for you. And you can move on to the next big super challenge. As always, if you or someone you know happens to be going through something that's more than you can handle, please remember that there are professionals like myself who are available, able, and willing to help, and are even providing remote services to assist. So please figure out who those people are in your community so that if you need the help, you can reach out and get the help that you need. And that is all we have for today. Good morning, world. Have an awesome day.